All right. Hey, everybody. It is the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. Probably a quiet one for today. It's a slow news week, I would
Did you
think.
tweet it? Did you tweet it, by the
Did I
way?
tweet it?
No, I haven't seen
Hang
it.
on. I'm tweeting it right there. It
Ah,
is. Ah,
retweet.
and Chrome is
There we
locked
go.
out. Nope, there it is.
Okay. Now people will come flooding, right? Let's just sit and watch.
Both of them, as they do every week.
Except for the week you tweeted the public link, and then we got like 4,000 people.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I don't know. I never know if we should tweet the Google Hangout, which gives people more interactivity and has a better experience, or whether we should tweet the YouTube, which is more familiar to people.
The Hangout has the worm.
The
And-
ups and downs.
Yeah, and the Q&A, but I do notice the YouTube has like a pop-up that says, hey, click this link for a more interactive thing. So, I mean, even if you just do the YouTube, they can find their way over, but anyway.
Well, we've been doing the Google Hangout for a while. Maybe we'll do the YouTube in the future and see if that makes a difference.
Sure.
We can double our viewership to 4. It could be big for
We
the
can just tweet both.
Yeah. So, interest. I want to ask a question. This is kind of a community interaction thing. So, pretending that I'm the community, because that's how I like to do things, And we're all the community, really, because we can all have chats on Google, not Google, on GitHub issues. So, I saw Fowler and friends having a chat about something on some GitHub issue. Oh, I remember which one it was. It was the one where I rejected the idea that we should do DNX, period, and then the command, and I suggested we get rid of the dot, because we used to do it without the dot. We added the dot, which means current directory, so it's DNX directory run, and I suggested we put the directory at the end, because it feels weird, because you always have to do dot. And they, kind of languished a little bit, as issues do, and it's just maybe getting some talk again, but it's getting talk as we are getting to a point where Visual Studio will be released, and there'll be a version out there, not a go-live version, but a version out there. So I was a little flippant thinking, well, let's just break it because we're not released. And they were like, no, we can't break people because that's how the tooling works now. So would you explain to me when we're allowed to break people and when we're not, and then maybe put it in the context of this issue?
Yeah, so earlier, during the Beta 3 to Beta 4 milestone, we talked about it on this stand-up. We broke a bunch of stuff on purpose by changing the names of the TFMs, those short little folder names inside the packages, and under the Solution Explorer, under references and ASP.NET 5 projects, they changed. Like when we introduced the DNX name, right? That's what it all happened, right? And we changed it in the middle of the Beta 4 milestone, which means if you were using the preview of Visual Studio from the first preview, whatever it was, of 2015, as soon as we made that change in GitHub, if you were using ASP.NET 5 from source, or you were using the nightly feeds, the MyGet feeds, you were now broken in Visual Studio. Like VS did not understand those packages with those TFNs. So that was a really hard break. Now we knew we were going to have to make that change, and frankly at the time we just didn't think many people were affected because we didn't think many people were using those feeds. It turned out a lot of people were using those feeds. Because that's how, the milestones were quite a bit longer at that point, and so people were wanting to keep up to date with stuff, which is great. And so there was a good period there of 6 weeks, and adding to that was the secrecy around Visual Studio, because as open as we are about ASP.NET, let me call it like it is, we're not as open about when VS RC ships and when VS RTM ships. You and I had a skirmish on this very hangout a few episodes back where you were trying to press me for release dates, and I was not handing them out, and we had this little back and forth, and that's because I knew when the RTM date was for VS, I knew when Beta 5 was going to ship, and I couldn't figure out a way to say both of those things without implying the other.
Right, and I knew both of those things, I just didn't know that they were a secret.
Correct. Right, and so I was trying to be very careful, and I said, look, I will tell you when I can't tell you, and I can't tell you. And you were like, well, that's too secretive. I was like, well, sometimes we're secretive. So the problem was, with Beta 4...
And I was just laughing. I was just sitting here eating popcorn.
But sometimes we're not secretive.
Yeah, but
I don't like being secretive. But it's not ASP.NET that's secretive in this context. It was like the larger Visual Studio organization.
It was a larger marketing machine to do with Visual Studio, which is not just that thing you install. It's like a brand and a whole thing, right? So I'm not the person to get involved in that. So coming back to the point, there was a big release of VS that was going to be a beta 4. I think it was RC, right? Now, Visual Studio RC was what our beta 4 was going to be in, so we couldn't push a new release of Visual Studio out. We couldn't tell you how long it was going to be before it was going to be fixed, because we couldn't tell you when the next release of VS was, because that was the RC release, and we just weren't allowed to tell you that. And so there was a period of like 6 weeks where people were just broken. If you wanted to use Visual Studio, you had to use beta 3.
And they weren't very happy for that time.
Oh. And so to our credit, I hope, we have said internally and publicly we are doing everything we can to ensure that doesn't happen again. So we now, if we are planning a change in any of the runtime pieces in DNX that we know will impact tooling, will impact Visual Studio, we do it in 2 phases. Just like doing a 2-phase database rollout in production, you do the schema change 1 week in a compatible way, and then in the next deployment you do an application change, or you might do it the other way around. You might do an app change that is back compat with the existing schema, and then you roll out the new schema in the next release. We're going to do the exact same thing with VS, and so we made changes in Visual Studio that will go out in Visual Studio 2015 RTM on July 20, which I can talk about because that's now public, that allow for naming changes that we haven't yet made in even the source code in GitHub. Because as soon as we make those changes, it'll break VSRC. So we now have to plan 2 tooling releases ahead in order to make changes of that nature. So when you brought up in this issue, oh, well, we can just break people, that just set off a few triggers in here because we are like, no, we cannot break anyone anymore. We really don't want to do that. So that doesn't mean we don't change APIs. We just don't want to break it in such a way that we leave you stranded with a version of Visual Studio, a pre-release, admittedly, but a version that you can't use with the latest stuff on MyGit or the latest stuff in GitHub.
Right, because I was thinking, I realized that the command line interface is an interface, right?
Yeah.
But it is an interface directly to Visual Studio now because Visual Studio doesn't just call into some COM thing anymore. It really calls DNX. So
yeah, and you can open Task Manager and you can watch DNX.exe appear when you do file new, right? Like it does just call DNX.
Yep.
Is there an indirection in there to allow for some changes without breaking things? You know what I mean, or is it possible to do? So meaning
well, that indirection is in VS. So, like I said, they've already made the changes to support both, so they can look for one, or they know that hey, in beta 7 you're going to call it this, so they can have like a switch in their code. It's like, oh, if you're referencing beta 7, then try and do this, or they may do it as a feature light up. Maybe they do that. They look for this name, and if that doesn't exist, they fall back to this other name. So that's where that indirection exists, but that indirection isn't exactly in a very fluid deployment model. It's in Visual Studio, but that's just the reality we have. We have stuff on NuGet, we have stuff in VS, and there really isn't an in-between. Although that is changing. As I talked about last time, our current plan is for beta 6, which will ship towards the end of July. We're currently saying, I think the plan right now, let me get my dates right, the week beginning 27th of July, that week is when we plan to ship beta 6. We're also planning to ship a new version of the Visual Studio tooling for ASP.NET, colloquially known as WTE, the Web Tooling Extensions. So we will ship a new version of WTE with beta 6. And so we're actually trying to address this problem by also increasing the cadence of tooling releases by shipping WTE out of band from Visual Studio releases themselves. So yeah, that's coming.
It was a long sentence.
Yeah, I know that. I once I was in, I had to keep going. Like I kind of realized.
I was impressed. I would not look at my feet if I were talking that. I would just because I would stumble. No, but yeah, it makes things clear, and it's an important thing to be clear about.
Yeah, as I said last time, just to carry on from last week, we're still going through the locking down the roadmap and schedules. I just walked out of a meeting to do this stand-up, where we have all the leads together and we're locking down, or attempting to, what high-level features are going into each beta. Like, so we've got beta 6 coming, then there'll be beta 7 and beta 8, and then very hopefully RC will be after that. So we're currently slotting in, high-level features into those releases, and as soon as we have that done and there's agreement all around, we will put that roadmap as one document up on GitHub. And so everyone can see, oh, like beta 8 is when X is going to turn up, rather than you having to go through the 60 different repos we have under the ASP.NET org and figure out when feature X or bug X is going to get fixed. We're going to try and make that a little more high level.
Cool. John, what do you have community-wise?
All right, let me flip over here just a second. And
Go ahead and be prepared there, John. No pressure.
Awesome. Well, it doesn't. The interface does not allow me to complete. I have to click.
Now now we're seeing you sharing yourself.
I know. I thought I'd start meta here. This is the Jeff Fritz has started writing these up. So in the past, all the links that I mentioned during this section are you have to go and look on YouTube and stuff. And now Jeff has started writing these up in nice format, and he kind of summarizes these. So
hit Control Plus for me a bit, and then he can take a screenshot of this one, and then he'll have a video of us watching a video of a blog post of a
It'll
video.
be incredible. Yep.
That'll be
So this
better than the dramatic zoom out.
Exactly. Okay, so there's that. While we're on that, we've got the blog post about the Beta 5 release. We have also the blog post about. See, I'm zooming in as I talk to you because I know the request is coming.
Yep.
So the Yeoman generators. Here's a post from Syed about the Yeoman generators with a very cool animated GIF here explaining it. And while we're talking about the Yeoman generators, here's the repo for it. So it's updated for Beta 5, but one thing that I had not been following quite as much is that there are a bunch of sub-generators as well. So the sub-generator list has continued to grow, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. So if you have not been following the Yeoman generators, these are definitely something to dig into more.
And this is a fun place to get involved on GitHub as well. We were just talking about what do we name them, and how do we come up with a hierarchy of these things.
So good stuff, including stuff like scaffolding, Angular controller, controller as, all that stuff. So very nice. Jason wrote me to say that he has no link, but that there are a lot more OmniSharp Atom refactorings. So that's cool. And I was trying to dig through the repo before and actually document them because he won't bother to do it himself, but I didn't get them listed.
Yeah, Atom is actually looking really good right now. So Atom went V1 in the last few weeks, and the OmniSharp plugin is now all-inclusive for Atom. So you just install the OmniSharp plugin into Atom V1, and you have ASP.NET 5 support. So it works really nicely.
Great stuff from them. Yep. Kenji over at Spoon pinged me, so they have Spoon containers for ASP.NET 5. So if you haven't played with Spoon, it's an insane. It's really cool. It's a container system for Windows. Makes it really easy to spin up things running on Windows. You can go to their site and have this running in seconds. So they have one for ASP.NET. One cool thing is they just added also for ASP.NET Dev. So this is tied directly to the repo. And so it'll pull down the latest version, and you'll have running, these are the commands you've got to type, and you're cloning and running the repo. So very
Spoon is like containers for the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to use them for IE. They used to have this thing that got shut down, but it was basically IE6 and IE7 containers, so you could have little containerized versions of the browser running. They'll grab registry calls and anything at all, and they'll just make a little tiny, not a VM, but a tiny little container that is isolated. It's kind of like the Office click-to-run stuff.
Yeah, they were doing the containers before containers got big and cool and were called containers.
Yeah, they were doing containers years before anybody was doing containers. Well, not years before. They were doing containers in the 60s, but I'm just saying containers on Windows, Spoon.net was like it for a very, very long time. So
if you want to play with ASP.NET 5, you don't want to install ASP, or you want to play with the newest stuff or whatever, this is a very, very low impact way to do that. I've been pointing out announcements on the announcements repo. Here's a new one about DNU feeds list. I believe, Damien, you may have mentioned this last week, but here's the issue about this. So new DNU feeds lists to list the feeds you've got in there. While we're talking about announcements, repos, and stuff, Alex pinged me to say he's got this. He's just starting this repo, but he's trying to write up breaking changes, and this is just a simple community-run Markdown thing. It's a little different. I know that in the announcements repo we have there are already breaking changes flagged issues. So if you go in here, you can find a bunch that'll say breaking changes, and there's a discussion and stuff. And it looks like he's writing these up more as from Beta 4 to Beta 5, here's what changed. So looks like that could be useful or interesting.
Cool.
Yep. Two cool things from Tuberk. These are at Skills Matter, so these are two video productions he's got So those are nice. I recommend checking those out. And then one last just kind of cool post here, and this is from Damien Bod. I've never been able to figure out if Bod is his last name or not. He's always just Damien Bod. But here, this is just a cool thing he did with Elasticsearch and hooking it up with ASP.NET 5, SignalR, and Angular. So
whenever I see like really cool posts like that, like go back to that post and look at the top. It's like it's like keyword I want to learn, comma, and keyword I want to learn. I'm like, yes.
All the
Someone
stuff,
put
right?
them all together for me.
Yeah. So that's my list for the week here.
Cool. And then, as I think we said before, what we'll do is Jeff Fritz will give us all these links. You'll give these links to him. I guess he's a people person, and he takes those and gives those to the customer. He'll take a list of links. We'll put them on the YouTube in the descriptions now, and we'll see a blog post about this. So everyone should make sure to subscribe to /webdev in their blog reader of choice, or pin it to your start menu, something. Because WebDev, there's a lot of great stuff happening on the WebDev blog right now.
Yep.
So all right. I'm just trying to battle. I actually posted a thing this last week too, and I'm battling with my laptop right now to load GitHub because I wanted to show you. John, can you bring up my repo on GitHub and go do the
yes. Here, just a second.
The PyDNX.
Oh yes.
Yes. I'm actually a little hurt that you didn't include that in the list of things.
Well, yeah. I thought it would have smacked of cronyism. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So here we go. Repositories.
So we'll just edit that bit out, okay, Scott?
The part where you're a crony?
Yeah, just edit all this out, and then we'll just cut as if like this was the last one.
And the next one on the list that I'm very excited to mention is Damian Edwards, upstanding community member, has written up instructions on DNX on Windows 10 IoT Core Raspberry Pi 2.
Yeah, finally did it.
So this was stuff that you showed off at NDC.
Yes.
And is now fully documented and amazing.
Wow, fully is a very strong word.
Fully documented.
Well, there's a README.
I fell asleep on the keyboard and that came out.
So putting this into context, we're going to continue to try to do stuff like this, but this is not a product or a deliverable or an artifact, correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you go back to to John's screen and look at what I wrote, I'm pretty sure that the second heading in very large type is called a word of warning.
A word of warning.
A word of warning. It very clearly states that, first of all, this is on my repo, not the ASP.NET repo. And second of all, that just because I'm writing this up is not implying that we support this in any way whatsoever. We want to enable people to have fun and to try this out and to give us feedback on whether this is an interesting scenario. And we'll continue to fix bugs. You can log bugs, obviously, but we may not prioritize them as high as other bugs. But we did enough hacking to get it to work, and so we wrote it up. And I want to know. I get a lot of retweets. A lot of people said they were going to do it over the long weekend. I haven't had one person come back and tell me whether they tried it and it worked, or they tried it and I had made a mistake and it didn't work. So I actually have no idea at the moment whether anyone else has got it to work. So if someone out there is watching this and they got it to work on their Raspberry Pi too, please let me know.
Here are some instructions. We don't even know if they work.
Well, it worked for me, but I wrote it up 2 weeks after I got it working, and then I didn't go through it again, because that's what everyone else is for. They can just tell me if I got it wrong.
Raspberry Pi is like $3 or $4, so if it burns up your Raspberry Pi, it's no big deal.
Well, it's $35, but that's a lot of burritos. Is this the same version of Windows IoT from Build?
Yeah, that's the only public release that I'm aware of. And I got it working on that one. I don't have any other release other than the one that they released to Build. So the instructions that I wrote up, do include, hey, go off to the Windows 10 IoT site, follow the instructions to get your Raspberry Pi 2 set up, get the PowerShell environment set up, VS, yada, 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 until it actually gets to the DNX part. Because, frankly, once you've got, the hardest part is getting your Pi set up with Windows 10 IoT Core and creating a user and doing all the good stuff. Then once you have that going, DNX is just build a DNX app, publish it, install the alternate DNX, the ARM DNX on your machine, run DNU publish to and include that one, copy it over using Windows Explorer, remote PowerShell into it, and run it. Like it's outside of it's pretty basic. It's getting the Pi set up.
I found that getting the remote PowerShell and the name server to work is basically the hard part.
Yes, absolutely.
Then it's just messing around with the command line.
Yep, absolutely. And it's slow, so don't expect it to be fast. Like, opening a PowerShell session takes 30 seconds. Like,
Really?
yeah,
I
and
didn't have that.
yeah, mine, it takes a long time when I do it.
Hmm.
Like, the people here have tried it have seen the same thing. So
Did
I don't
you?
know.
Someone suggested installing Bonjour on your network
Really?
and referring to it as whatever.local.
Huh. Isn't Bonjour that Apple thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The problem is it includes a virus though, which is called iTunes, and dealing with that is a huge problem.
So shall we answer some questions?
Let us answer questions.
So people are very responsive. There are +8 on the tweet it like 30 minutes to 1 hour ahead. The problem with that is that would require the three of us to be organized enough to agree 30 minutes ahead of time that this is when we were going to start.
So the other problem is, like, I appreciate that that's important, but
Yes.
I need to start the Hangout and be in the Hangout streaming before I get a link to what the Hangout will be.
Right.
So I could do that and then just sit here for 30 minutes.
Can you transfer the session? Can you start it on another computer and then join it? You know what I mean?
No. So I accidentally Control-W'd this session and could not get back into my own session.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
We'll do our best, but like I was driving my kids back from Lego camp. Like life happens. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We'll do our best.
Oh, Suchiman actually got it working. Says I got the PyDNX working, and yeah, it got stuck after a few requests as described. Perfect. It works.
Oh, so it works once or twice. It serves.
It works for. I think it works for how many cores are on the machine multiplied by 3, something like that. Like it works or 2. Like you get 8 or 12 requests.
You can serve one HTTP request per core. Period.
Yeah, and I think it's like literally one HTTP request per thread assigned per core. And I think we start up 2 or 3 threads in that server per core.
That's
and then every time a request is handled, it kills the thread.
Which just means you need more cores.
That's right, or more pies. And you just put one in front to load balance, and then you swap that one out every 12 requests to the other ones. It's just a cascading problem.
Right, it's kind of like app pool restarting, but you just restart the entire device.
Classic. Anyway, is it possible to upload the HTML templates by Visual Studio to GitHub so the community can make them suggestions? I feel that we can do a much better job than you can. I paraphrase that last bit a bit. The reality is there actually are in GitHub. That repo is just private right now. We have been debating whether the templates that go into Visual Studio should be a public GitHub repo or not. Again, I'm just trying to be completely honest. Traditionally, they're fairly sensitive. Like what goes into those templates is looked at by the highest levels in Microsoft, to be fair. It's not just, hey, a bunch of people in this room decide what goes in there and it's done. They tend to get reviewed quite high up because it's an integral part of the acquisition and on-ramping experience of Visual Studio marketing speak. But I'm not averse to making them public. It's just that I don't think people should then expect that every pull request will be, oh yeah, we'll add the HTML5 boiler template because you want it in there by default, So.
What about Yeoman? I mean, I had heard talk that at some future point you could see Visual Studio calling Yeoman, and that would be the file new project. Should people in the community spend their time helping the Yeoman generators? They'd get farther along, wouldn't you think?
That's an interesting discussion. I think the interim step is that perhaps the VS templates and the Yeoman template should be built from a common base. Whether that means that VS templates for ASP.NET simply become a call to Yeoman is another step again. That is an interesting idea that we could possibly explore. Certainly not one that we've decided we're going to do at some future point.
No, I'm saying that today, if you think you can do better, and you want to make change and have it happen in weeks instead of months, the Yeoman generators are a place you could spend time there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's just a higher bar, I guess is the way to put it, and a higher tax to be paid when something goes into VS in something as visible as the file new screen. So we tend to be very careful.
Well, and I would also point out that people who spend their time in file new are more newbies than they are us.
Yeah, absolutely. Regarding PyDNX, speaking as someone who's never played with IoT on Pis before but really wants to, there seems to be several models on Amazon, some other retailers. Do all Raspberry Pi 2s work with Win 10, or is there a list somewhere? Yes, if it's Raspberry Pi 2 and not Raspberry Pi B plus something, as long as it's the Raspberry Pi 2, it works. I would suggest you don't buy it from Amazon. I buy mine from Element 14, which I believe is the official distributor in the US. Scott, is that right?
Yep.
Yep.
That's
So
where I
they
buy
have
all, sorry, I'm plugging a monitor in. Yes, that's where I buy all my pies from.
Yeah, so they have a kit which for $40 comes with a Raspberry Pi 2 and an 8 GB micro SD card with the Raspberry Pi logo on it, which is kind of nice, which has Raspbian Pi on it. Now you can just flash that SD card with Windows 10 IoT Core, or put a different one in if you want to keep that SD card with Raspbian Pi on it. But they tend to not overcharge. A lot of other retailers tend to mark up the Pis for whatever reason, because sometimes the official retailer goes out of stock. And you can do what Scott did, buy two and put an SD card in each and label them appropriately.
And then keep extra ones for other operating systems.
For other things. What else? Any chance of hooking came up? If I make a change to a controller and then refresh the page, the time to first byte seems quite slow. Will this improve significantly before ITM? Well, that's because when you change a controller, assuming you're using VS and you refresh the page, we destroy the web server and then reboot it. And we are working a lot to try and make that time as fast as possible, but it's never going to be measured in tens of milliseconds. You know, we have to start the web server, boot the CLR, compile your application. Well, technically the app was already compiled in VS, and we shuttle the bytes across a local socket from dnx.exe running next to Visual Studio across to isexpress.exe, and then that boots up your app. We feel that a good number for there is about 1 second. So if you make a change, hit save in VS, Alt-Tab over to the browser that was already running, and hit refresh, that entire process from when you made the save in VS, that's the point that we kill the process and then recompile the app. We hope that that takes about a second for something like the File New MVC app. Obviously, as your app gets bigger, you'll pay a little bit more cost in compilation and JIT and all those type of things. But don't expect that to be like a 20 millisecond time to first byte when you change C# code. That's just not going to happen.
Does that mean 1 second is always the goal?
So right now, I know that, for example, when Fowler did a really big push on this recently, he was trying to drive that process of I make a code, basically the startup time from starting from nothing to booting DNX up through IS Express and having it serve the page. He wanted that to be under 1 second. Like we were trying to get it down from like 1800 milliseconds to 900 and something milliseconds. And that was kind of the watermark we were trying to hit. As I said, in reality, you're using in VS, making code changes, you hit save, then you Alt-Tab, and then you hit F5. That takes some measurable amount of time because it's a human doing that work, right? So generally, you burn through a couple hundred milliseconds already from the time that you've hit save and we detect that change. By the time you've hit refresh in the browser, you've generally already gone through at least a quarter of a second, if not half a second. So we get that time for free, and then you're only sitting there waiting for however much more time it takes before we can serve that first byte. So we try to make it as fast as we can, but you have to appreciate that the server is dying and we're starting it again, but we are doing it as fast as we can. I think we've done those. We've answered all of those ones. Let me scroll down. Anything else? Any updates on performance? Sorry.
Well, there was one question about the from Suchiman also. He's asking about why DNX looks like a ported Unix application, and why there's the dot.
I wasn't gonna answer that one.
Well, I think
I was gonna not accept the premise of the question.
Well, I actually think there's the reason for the dot whatever. There's a reason for dot prefixing folders, right?
It's a Unix/Linux based thing, and Node does it with its stuff because it's cross-plat, and we do it because we're cross-plat. This person seems to be unhappy with that because it's like on Windows you're supposed to, because all the Windows docs say should be putting something in that data under the local user profile, and we chose not to bury it there. We tried to make it as common across the three platforms as possible just by creating a .dnx folder and sticking it in there. We know there is guidance in other places on Windows that says don't do that. We also know that our own products from Microsoft choose to do things slightly differently within the scope of the user profile, whether it's in the root of the folder, if it's in the app data folder, if it's in local versus roaming. There are reasons to do one over the other. It's in .dnx now, for better or worse. I don't see that changing before RTM, and we do try and make it somewhat consistent across the three platforms and put it in some type of user local storage at .dnx. But that's really the reason. Can we have a browser link for the page changes? I appreciate it will take as long, but automating the refresh would be nice. Oh, so they want browser link in VS to detect when you make a server-side code change and have that refresh your browser over there. That's certainly possible. There is a button already for auto refresh, right? Next to the launch button, there's that
You
little
can
circle
hit
button.
Control Enter.
Enter, yeah. I think that
Hit
doesn't
Control
reload.
Enter to force it. So if you hit Control Shift B and then hit Control Enter,
Yeah.
you might be able, actually, brainstorming here, you might be able to put that in a gulp and have it bound to be up before a build and then just throw it the other direction.
Well, users couldn't do that now. There's just not the right amount.
I'm just trying to think if there's a way to.
No, yeah, I know what you're trying to think of. I don't think that bridge just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what you're trying to do is get browser link, which is connected through to debenv.exe, through to Visual Studio, to send a message through to the running browser, the JavaScript for browser link running in the browser to refresh the page. You really can't do that unless you are browser link now. And you can write a browser link extension that supports that. Web Essentials do that. We should probably just support that. I mean, I think we do it now for CSS. So if you make a CSS change in Visual Studio, it'll auto-load the CSS in the browser via browser link. There's no reason we couldn't do that, or certainly enable that as an option for ASP.NET 5 apps. So,
that's a good idea.
We should currently do that. We should talk to Mads about that.
Yeah.
Pressure on the community to be early adopters of .NET 4.6 or .NET Core 5, with up to .NET 4.5.1 support being discontinued fairly soon. I'm not quite sure what. Is that a statement?
They want to push people onto the new stuff by discontinuing support for 4.5.1 and friends.
Yeah, I mean, so .NET in general, everything since .NET 4, which was back in 2010, has been an in-place update. John, your screen, my screen has gone black, and you're not there. But I'll just assume I'm talking to someone.
No, we can hear you.
There we go. Okay. Now I can see you. Okay. Hello. So everything since .NET 4 has been an in-place update, which means that if you install .NET 4.5 on .NET 4, you end up with just .NET 4.5, and then 4.5.1, and 4.5.2, and then now 4.6. They're all in-place updates to .NET 4. They don't simultaneously support .NET 4 and 4.5 and 4.5.1 and 4.5.2 and 4.6. So if there's a patch that needs to go out, they don't push to all of them. What happens is on a given cadence, the servicing baseline gets reset. That is the lowest version of any given train of servicing, so like the 4x train, gets reset to some version of .NET. And so I think that happened last year to .NET 4.5.1, perhaps. So if you wanted to get a patch for .NET, you had to be, for .NET 4, you had to be on at least .NET 4.5.1 in order to get that patch, for example. And this happens periodically based on the Windows support cycle and the .NET support cycle, which are all publicly documented up at support.microsoft.com/lifecycle or something. There's an official website for all that. I'm not interpreting that as pressuring the community to be early adopters of .NET Core. I mean, .NET Core is a completely different beast because it's not installed on Windows. So,
I think the pressure is that we're excited about it, and we're talking about it, and sometimes we talk about stuff we're excited about and forget about the other stuff.
That's not sometimes. That's pretty much all the time.
I'm trying to be
fair, right?
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, but just to make sure people understand that we still care about all aspects of ASP.NET. I'm working on the Visual Studio 2015 keynote stuff now and this week, and I'm working on making sure that there's web forms discussion about HTTP2 and about async model binding and all the cool stuff that's happening in .NET 4.6. Like, to be clear, .NET 4.6 is a good thing, and we should be watching for that as well. And you can be going live on .NET 4.6 pretty soon, Yep. So it's it's a good reminder to us not to kind of throw the core baby out with the bathwater.
And it's interesting because we always get the feedback on both sides. This person is saying like, hey, can we push the community to get the newest, greatest, latest? And then we also hear at the same time from other people like, hey, slow down, don't forget about me. So
yeah. Tough. It's a balancing act. The point is that we're trying to be as transparent as we can to help make people make decisions, and to remember that none of this technology is going anywhere anytime soon. My blog runs .NET 2 quite nicely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, and by the way, I think I told you this, but I've been working on DOS blog in .NET 2 on 2015.
Yeah.
And I just installed a bunch of Roslyn-based refactoring tools from I think it's vsrefactoringessentials.com.
Cool.
vsrefactoringessentials.com.
Awesome.
I'll have a blog post about that in a little bit. So that's working really nicely in my .NET 2 app on my 2015 installation of Visual Studio. So that's pretty hot.
On a Raspberry Pi 2.
Yes, do the entire thing on it, running it all on an Apple Watch.
I had one last question that this was.
You've gone completely dark, by the way, John.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
So we'll look at Damien, and Damien can just move his mouth while you talk. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask Damien anyhow. Is there anything new with the benchmarking stuff? I knew we talked about that a while ago.
No, we haven't. There hasn't really. Not much has changed other than one of our devs is working on Kestrel right now to help stabilize some of the issues we've seen there, and to try and perhaps move some of the learnings that we got out of some of the experimental servers we put on the benchmarking rig back into Kestrel, into sort of make them more real. And then I need to order some more hardware because we saturated our gigabit NIC. So
Cool.
I need to send an email right after this to our supply person and ask them to spend some money to get me 10 gigabit switch and new cabling and 10 gigabit network cards. And then I'll go back and run the test again and see if I can't max the CPU instead of maxing the network.
Awesome.
That's hot.
Yeah.
All right, prepare the dramatic zoom out.
Locked and loaded.
Engage. We need like a thing at the end, like Intel. Bum 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 bum.
Ba, ba, ba.